Good evening! It's Monday, September 5th, 2022. Welcome back to BoomerRexTonight, your nearly daily source for news and politics. I'm RisenLadyHeathen. Hey, asshole, what separates our show from other Millennial news podcasts?
Nope, not a damn thing. I don't know what.
We have a boomer, not just any boomer. We have Mr. BoomerRex himself. You two eat, sleep, and breathe politics, and I'm still learning. That's three unique perspectives we share, along with the facts from our literal round table. Tonight, we finally get to do our Tucker Carlson rant breakdown. Sorry it took so long, but I hope you appreciate our attention to detail on this, because, as I said, this particular rant was a lot. There was a lot in it, and it took me, I would say, 4 times as long as the last Tucker Carlson rant I did, because there was just so much bullshit in it. So, let's get started. I know I already did the first section, but I figure it's worth repeating. It's been a while, so let's get into this. Everything that follows are as close to exact quotes, verbatim, as I could get. And that's the entire 16 minutes and 58 seconds of this video. Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. It's a happy Monday, as we've often noted on this show, because it's hard not to notice. We are living in one of those moments where so much is happening all at once, and information about it all is so tightly controlled that huge history-changing events can occur, and in fact are occurring right now, and nobody seems to be aware of them. It's pretty unsettling, actually. Here's one example. Now, a big sign pops up next to him saying, "Back to the Dark Ages." I don't know exactly what time that pops in, but it pops in during this next paragraph. Europe is descending into poverty. Did you know that? Has someone told you that? So the most advanced continent on the planet, the birthplace of Western civilization, our civilization, is getting much poorer very quickly. It's moving backward at high speed. Just a year ago, Europe was a modern place. For example, the overwhelming majority of Europeans heated their homes with natural gas, as modern people do. In Germany, the continent's richest country, only about 6% of households, most of them rural, heated with cordwood, and you'd expect that. Again, given Germany is a modern, industrialized country with central heating and indoor plumbing and all the trappings of a society that has moved beyond the medieval period. Last year, about 6% of Germans used wood to heat their homes, but that has changed dramatically. Demand for firewood in Germany has risen so fast there's none left to buy. You can't get it. So desperate Germans who are now cutting their own wood, scouring the forest like their ancestors for sources of heat. So first of all, I want to say, this is all part of his first section, and so is the next paragraph or so. Now, in this first section, he's aggressively, as you can tell, blasting Europe, saying that they are no longer, quote-unquote, modern, saying they're going back to the, quote-unquote, Dark Ages.
And his proof of that is they burn wood.
Yep.
Yeah, because
That's all it takes.
burning
It's
wood.
fucking easy to end up a savage.
Burning
And Tucker
wood to
Carlson's
heat
one.
your home turns you into a savage,
Yep.
person. You live in your own
Medieval.
shit.
Yeah.
Dark Ages. So, at this point, he says, "Watch," and he shares a clip from NBC with his and the Fox News logo covering parts of their banner on the bottom. The NBC banner is readable on the bottom, and it says, "Europe facing energy crisis." The clip talks about a town in Germany that's cutting down and shredding trees to make wood for people to heat a small town of about 60 people in the coming winter. The leader of the small town outside of Berlin, well outside of Berlin if I remember correctly, says he doesn't want to rely on the government to fix it. Like, we can't just we can't just wait for the government to do something. We have to be proactive, which is good.
Well, and like many small German towns, it sounds like they have a central heating plant. Mm-hmm. Right? So hot water is piped to houses and so forth. So any source of fuel will kind of do.
Yep. But again, I remind you, there are 60 people in this town.
Yeah. No, Europe is in trouble for energy right now for the simple reason that Pootie Boy is using his energy.
Oh yeah, no, we're gonna get into that.
Yeah,
in a
okay,
minute.
fine.
So now it cuts back to Tucker, and he says, "So they call it biomass, but it's wood. They're burning wood. Again, they did it during the feudal period. That's Germany."
They didn't burn biomass like this, Tucker.
No.
God.
I burn wood in my
here's the other
fireplace.
thing.
I guess I'm still
For
medieval.
those of you who are like, well, you know, we all know that I am a very strict, person who says words have meaning. So, the definition of the term biomass is organic matter used as a fuel, especially in a power station for the generation of electricity. In this
Big jug of
case,
water,
it is
oil.
not being used for electricity. It is being used for wood, or for heat. But in any case, it doesn't really fucking matter. The point is that nobody cares. 60 people in town in Germany, and they're handling the situation quite well. So, fine. He continues. In Poland, families are standing in line for days to buy coal. Not in 1910, right now. Tonight, cars queued up outside coal mines hoping for fuel. Quote, "This is beyond imagination," one 57-year-old Polish man told Reuters. "People are sleeping in their cars. I remember the communist times, but it didn't cross my mind that we could return to something even worse. Oh, but it's come. Something even worse has arrived." So you made some
My
notes
turn.
on this.
So, this is one of those things that should go down in history, like the Polish cavalry charge that may or may not have.
Yeah.
As one of those things that Poland, you keep doing this, and we're gonna have a special relationship because the reason this is happening, aside from what you had pointed out when we were talking about this off the show, of how Poland manufactures it right, their coal is better for other processes. They don't make good lump coal.
Yeah.
So, turns out this is also because when it came time to slam the door on sanctions, they said fucking immediately. We don't buy anymore because Russia's assholes. We know.
Yeah, they have reason to know.
So, God love you, Poland.
But again,
Yeah.
I wanna point out his his where he says, "In Poland, families are standing in line for days to buy coal. Not in 1910, right now." In 1910, nobody would wait in line for days to buy coal. They wouldn't have the ability to. They wouldn't have the. They wouldn't be able to. It's just not something you could have done back then. They would have just gone out and cut down some trees and boom, made their own coal.
Anything you can burn fucking coal. Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, him trying to compare any of this to the 1910s or
Well,
back in
and
the
doing
whatever,
everything
you
so
can't.
far he can
There's
to
no
avoid
comparison.
discussing why.
Well, and one might ask the stupid son of a bitch, how many people are homeless in America?
Right?
Right? And is that not medieval? Wasn't that a big medieval thing there, Tucky boy?
Yep.
So,
No, serfs had it better. Serfs were actually attached to the land.
yeah.
So, he continues. The French government has announced energy rationing this winter. Just the other day, France had so much energy they exported it to other countries. It was a net exporter of energy. Now there won't be enough heat in France for everyone in the country to stay warm. In the UK, 70% of restaurants are preparing to close, to go under. Why? Because when winter comes, they won't be able to afford to keep their heat and lights on, etc., etc. This is happening across Europe and every country. So the question is, why is it happening? And the answer is extremely simple. There's
Yes,
an
it is.
energy shortage in Europe. Cheap energy is essential. It is the key to everything that a normal society strives for. Prosperity, safety, a longer life expectancy for its citizens. Everything
Tucker's
depends
gonna
on
have to breathe soon.
everything depends on cheap energy, but Europe no longer has it.
Can't be wrong that long.
And
after.
as a
It
result,
causes me to-
things are falling apart very quickly.
Yeah.
So Tucker Carlson would rather be on his knees licking Putin's balls?
Well, and that's the thing is, yes, no, everything he just said there is stupidly misunderstood, but also technically accurate. Right? It falls in the category of nearly. We
Yeah,
haven't hit
we're going to
accurate
have some
truth yet.
energy problems while we're busy blocking the Russians
Yeah.
out of that market.
Well, and avoids the Yeah, that
We've
was
seen
Russia's
what-
trick.
we've-
Cheap energy and those petrodollars are what gave birth to the international right.
And no, France did not export energy. France transshipped Russian energy that came to them through pipelines.
Yep.
So, anyway.
You
Again,
did
this
some
is...
research on the 70%.
Oh, yes. So the number I could find is 50%, according to the group that owns the largest number of pubs in all of England.
Okay, says they're going to have trouble this winter.
Well, hold on now. Turns out that's because utility costs are capped for British, people at homes.
Yeah.
Not
But not
true
for
for businesses. So, they'll have to pass a piece of legislation with their functional government.
Yep.
Yeah, they'll be fine. It's
Yep.
a money thing. Don't worry. Governments are great at, making more money. This is where the value of a
No,
fiat
there
currency
will be
comes
rationing. They'll have,
Yes.
62-degree temperatures in houses and
Yep.
stuff. Has little Tucky Boy forgotten that we had odd even gas rationing? And
Texas turned off.
that's
Texas turned off on its own, and that
right.
wasn't due to
Killed
anybody.
more than 100 people because their fucking electric companies couldn't provide electricity.
Yeah.
And then,
And Texas doesn't
since
have
they sell
trees.
electricity the highest bidder, they were sending people bills where they had normally had a $300 winter month bill. They were getting $9,000, $10,000 bills.
Yep. Well,
So, hey,
surge pricing.
works right out, man. I tell you, them red states are on top of it.
Now, another thing that
Jacksonville have water yet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing that Tucker Carlson is taking advantage of here is how little Americans know about how Europe
Yeah.
actually works.
You can just tell them it's a socialist hellscape, and they'll believe it.
A lot of European countries have very specific rules, like you said. Not just France, but several other places have caps on how much the energy costs and such can go up in a certain year, or how much oil and that sort of stuff can be charged to households. Specifically to help out the people who are struggling. And that's something that we don't have here in America. So you wouldn't think that it would be something that some other country would do. And he's very, very specifically never mentions it. And
That's the problem, is he doesn't do any of the conversions that a real news show would. But that's also why a lot of his audience is there.
Yeah, they like the simplicity of being wrong.
All right, and this next part is actually where we're really going to start digging into some of his numbers and why they're not as big of a concern as he's making it. Energy costs, and he, quote, energy costs in Europe are expected to increase by hundreds of % in the coming months. Germany's year-ahead price of electricity, as the benchmark for all Europe, is measured in euros per megawatt hour. That price has just exceeded 1,000 euros for the first time in history. For perspective, just a week ago, last Monday, the cost was about 700 euros per megawatt hour, and that was a record. In other words, the price rise is approaching 50% in a single week. That's so y'all out there who are like, whoa, that's a 6% increase. Is it? Your yearly average, whatever. It's
Yes.
within their average yearly.
It's a 6% increase to their annual cost. We would love that. That is so much lower than other people's various bills go.
Again, Germany has one of those caps. It can only go up X percent. So, again, this is over. Okay, so if you think of 700 euros, everybody who's listening to this is going to think of $700 and be like, holy shit, that's a lot of money. And now you're thinking $1,000 and holy shit, that's a real lot of money. Like,
Well, and part of that is America sees, right? Germany sees itself as a country full of Germans. For the most part, there's some racism.
So yeah, it's $1,000.
But
close enough. But the point is that
it's more than
$1,000.
$1,000. Euro's doing better than that.
$1,000 in Europe is different, I feel like.
Their base pays are better in 12 other things.
That's what I mean,
No, they have
right?
a higher
Yeah.
standard
Functional
of living
fucking
across the board.
That also has more to do with the fact that they all think of themselves as Germans, and Americans would be just as happy if we declared ourselves a pirate flotilla.
Fair.
So, at some level, that's fine, but we need some fucking rules here on Pirate Island. I am perfectly down to live in full-ass Pinocchio Cocaine Island. I just kind of think of Florida as all of that. And I loved when I lived in Florida. It was the best.
Okay. So he's got another sentence, or a couple of several.
Well, you
bullshit
can always
sentences,
count
but-
on Tucker Carlson for some more sentences.
Anyway, he continues. In France, electricity went up 25% in one day. That was last Friday. Imagine that happening to you. Here's what Europe looks like tonight. So the 25%
They don't have to. They
in
live
one day,
Texas.
that's the year ahead. That wasn't an actual increase. That was the, remember how before he was talking about the megawatt hour, whatever, blah, blah, blah. This 25% he's discussing was a year ahead. So next year, it's looking at being 25% higher than it is currently. But again, you have to remember, a lot of these countries have caps on how much household heating and electricity can go up. So,
And again, they have functional governments, so
Yes.
even if they didn't, they'll pass one, or they'll.
well, and a lot of these countries, I looked into it, a lot of these countries are passing, I think Germany specifically, hold on, I made a note, I did not. But a lot of these countries are passing where they're giving people money, kind of like when we had COVID and people were struggling and we sent people money. They're doing that for their, like, oh, it went up by this amount, you get 1,000 extra euros, for this month.
Yeah, they're
or
going to try
whatever.
and find a way to defray their costs for their people because they believe that's the purpose of having a government.
Right.
Yep.
So they're trying. So anyway, after he says this, he says, here's what Europe looks like tonight. And then he shares another clip from the same story that he had shared earlier on NBC with the same banner below that still says Europe facing energy crisis. This thing that he said is not in the mainstream news and that nobody knows about and nobody's talking about, except he's using
His
an
reference
NBC
is using a mainstream news article.
article that's specifically discussing it. So again, he's already counteracting everything he's trying to claim in this.
Well,
But
and
anyway.
apparently Fox doesn't have any good reporting on it because Fox is, as we know, infotainment, not
Yep.
news.
Okay.
Legally.
So this time it's talking about how public monuments and tourist attractions have to shut their lights off. The voiceover guy explains this is due to concerns over the hot summer and the fear of a potentially bitterly cold winter. It discusses extremely high energy prices, putting Europe on a war footing with Russia as the enemy. Quote, we're in what can be described as a hybrid war, the voiceover quotes French President Emmanuel Macron in an interview. Russia uses energy resources like it does food as a war weapon to exert pressure. The voiceover guy finishes, oil prices have doubled, coal prices have quadrupled, and natural gas is now 7 times more expensive than early last year. So that's the end of the clip. But again, Emmanuel Macron is, of course, putting the blame where it lies on Russia using its energy resources like it does food as a war weapon to exert pressure.
Yep.
And that's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's the origin of all of this for Europe because of their proximity to Russia and their having ignored the fact that Russia is shitholistan.
They tried doing the
And-
blue jeans thing to Russia, and it went exactly the other way, and they pumped
Well,
a shit ton
because
of
the Russian-
petrodollars into making Europe all fucked up and London dry.
Yep. And so they're paying a high price. On the other hand, right, the world energy markets are busily adapting,
Absolutely.
right? You've been getting oil and gas from Russia. Now you need a pipe that runs to the port,
Yep.
right? Folks are rerouting super tankers and so forth and so on.
Now,
The energy, yeah, it's going to be hard in Europe for a while.
but another
But this
thing,
will also encourage them to do a number of things that they should have done a long time ago.
oh, for sure. But one of the things that Tucker doesn't mention that actually happened is that some countries hadn't completely cut off. They had toned down what they were
Yeah.
taking from Russia. And then Russia suddenly said, oops, the oil line shut off. Oh no, that's terrible for you.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
sad. So sad.
No, and again, the thing
So
that
this was
Europe will
Russia
have to remember,
cutting them off, not them not being
the thing
whatever.
that Europe will have to remember is that what Russia did with that oil money was invade Ukraine
Yeah.
and threaten other
Yeah.
Formerly Soviet
Invade
states.
Georgia, right?
Yeah.
Destabilize parts of Azerbaijan. You name it, they did
took
it.
Crimea. They
Pumped a shit ton into the Wagner group and sent them all over everywhere.
Yeah. So, it's time for Europe to realize that they have, the modern Hitler on their doorstep, and they're going to have to react to this. The good news is the Russians have demonstrated that their kleptocracy has rerouted so much of that money that the Russian army is incompetent.
It's about 10 years off.
And Russia should remember that NATO isn't.
Yep.
So.
But I believe, right, we turned Ukraine around. Because again, I think they were right on their assessment of if they had invaded the Ukraine of 2014 or whatever.
Yep.
Fuck yeah. No, they'd have taken them in an afternoon. They apparently had the head of Ukraine intelligence. Fuck, man. That's the game right there.
Okay. So just a bit of a callback so we know what's going on. So the voiceover guy finishes. Oil prices have doubled, coal prices have quadrupled, and natural gas is now 7 times more expensive than early last year. Back to Tucker. 7 times more expensive. So it turns out, if you don't have cheap natural gas, you can't run the continent. Now, if you got a graduate degree and live in a city in the United States, you may be shocked to learn this. You may never have heard this before. You may have believed that fossil fuels were on their way out any day now. And you thought that because the Davos people and our own leaders assured us that for decades they told us that green energy was the future, and the future is here. It's here. As recently as last month, the World Economic Forum claimed that Europe could save, quote, 1 trillion in fossil fuel costs by switching to renewables. But it turns out, and this may not shock you, they had no clue what they were talking about. They knew nothing about the subject. The subject they talked about endlessly.
Okay, and now at least we finally got to the speech. The rest was like candy coating.
Yeah.
And at least vaguely attached to reality numbers or any of the other things.
Yes. Yeah. Continue, sorry.
We went on a whole little screed about education there, which of course is great for Fox Base and viewers.
Yeah. Well, you always have to, kick down on
slap them kids.
The people who actually know what they're talking about, as opposed to Tucky Carlson.
And none of them that I know of were talking about how on Thursday we're going to turn off all the gas. Fuck no.
No, but they had noticed that the cost of new solar and new wind is lower than the cost of new natural gas-fired plants.
Yeah.
Which means the problem is you can generate lots of cheap electricity. You need to move it around.
Yep.
So. No problem.
Now remember, this is part 2 of Tucker Carlson's rant, okay? When he said this line, energy costs in Europe are expected to increase by hundreds of % in the coming months. That was the beginning of part 2. And part 2 is literally all about shitting on everybody in America who, apparently went to college and complaining, taking his energy facts and twisting them to his own whatever by leaving out very important.
He's just looking for something to whine about that people might blame on Joe Biden.
Right.
Well, and
that's the whole point behind Fox News.
I don't think so. I think it's more refined than that. I think he knew that by the end of that part, he was losing the attention of even the people in the lounge chairs.
Yeah, okay.
And so he spiked the ball by slapping a group that they universally haven't liked, right? The people who identify with Archie Bunker with no understanding that there's a character arc to Archie Bunker, where he ends up on my side of the table at the end.
Yeah, he does.
Because he knows that America is all of the Americans doing whatever piratical shit they want, as long as no one's crying.
Right. And this part is like the main crux of his argument, right? So this is where, after this last clip, and him yelling about the Davos people, promising... Go ahead.
Oh, I'm willing to yell about the Davos people.
For sure. Tucker does it because he doesn't get slapped as a Pez dispenser at that point. Right. Protocols of the elders of anyway. So no, right, the global elite, that's the thing, and the da-da-ba. He'd be just as happy to say the Illuminati, aliens, or shadow people.
Right.
When what he's really talking about are the kleptocracy that have held down wages in the U.S.
Yep. And the U.S. ought to boycott that
have
shit.
ensured that we didn't have an effective healthcare system.
Shelled that shit.
Yeah.
And
We got them all in one spot.
he's gonna go on and he's gonna shit about on green energy.
Yep.
And again,
How does he shit on green energy?
oh, you're gonna love this.
This is why we delayed it till you could be here, because you have all the
Okay.
numbers, and you're gonna go, the fuck?
So he says, our own leaders assured us of that for decades. They told us that green energy was the future, and the future is here, and it's here. The future is here, it's here, as recently as last month, blah, blah, blah. They knew nothing about the subject they talked about endlessly. Sorry, I lost my place. I found it. But the thing is that nobody thought that green energy was here right now,
Right.
and that and if you thought that, like, you must live in a wonderful place, and I'm sorry to break it to you, but no. Certainly some people have managed to use solar power to their advantage and get off the grid and stuff like that. That's fine, but the majority of people understood that it's going to be a long time before we get out from under our oil, people who are ruling the world right now, because the oil people are going out of their way to keep us from doing so. They're
Yep.
not going to make that easy.
Well, at the same time,
and
the
that's
number
just
one
not-
investors in,
Yeah.
because they know the story's over.
Yeah.
Right. Their biggest complaint is going to be that there's no good liquid answer. Because if there was, they have an infrastructure that does that.
Yeah. No, and there will be problems with the large-scale adoption of green energy.
Yep. The poor are going to get hyper fucked.
But for him to
Not
say,
necessarily for their electric bills, but depending on how we handle this, one of the solutions, which we have talked about here, is going off-grid.
Yeah.
Buy some storage, buy enough solar, and tell them to take the wire off the property.
Yeah. Fine for us, but
Right. Not
enough
good
people
for,
do that. Right. It's the cutting the cord problem.
Yeah.
Right. Cable companies are still telling their investors we're going to get them to $200 a month bills on streaming services and the various. And
Yeah, I think that I clicked on a thing on Hulu today and found out you could pay $69 a month for something and said no.
no.
right.
Yeah, please don't. But again, this is incitement, right? He says they knew nothing about the subject. That's
Yeah.
just his opinion, and it's wrong.
Well, no. It's inflammatory.
Inflammatory. Thank you. That was exactly
Yeah.
what I was looking for. But anyway, it's bullshit. It's a throwaway line. This is what he's saying to get people like riled up. Like
Yeah.
they don't know anything. Of
Again.
course they don't know anything.
New green energy is cheaper than new.
Hold that thought.
Okay.
Here we go. Green energy, quote, green energy cannot replace fossil fuels. Not now, not anytime soon. Fossil fuels remain what they have always been, the key to civilization. That is true now. That is true now. That has been true since Homo erectus started the first cooking fire in a cave nearly 1 million years ago.
That's where we built the oil derrick before we built the wheel.
So-called green energy is not
When was
close.
Homo erectus?
So-called green energy is not close, is nowhere near replacing gas and oil and coal. No shit. It's measurable. We could have known this. Anyone with 8th grade math skills could have figured out in about 10 minutes that we cannot
2
replace
million years
fossil.
ago. 2 million years ago.
Anyone with 8th grade math skills could have figured out in about 10 minutes that we cannot replace fossil fuels with renewable or green energy. And of course, they must have known that. When they told you otherwise, it was just posturing. It was childish and destructive fantasy talk that apparently fooled millions of their citizens and millions of ours. The Green New Deal means what it always meant. It means poverty. And the people pushing the Green New Deal must have known that all along. They don't actually believe climate change is an imminent threat. If they actually believed climate change was an imminent threat, an existential emergency, the first thing they would have done, the very first, would be to ban private jets. Oh, but no. To this day, Al Gore still flies on private jets. Barack Obama owns tens of millions of dollars of beachfront property. He knows the oceans aren't rising. Come on.
No, he's just got enough to throw away that
Again,
much. But
this is a meaningless rant. There's no
And
facts
aircraft are a
in
meaningless
here.
contributor to the climate problem.
yep.
But
They do insert they do insert pollutants at altitudes we'd prefer they didn't. There
No,
are a
no,
number
we-
of ways, and we've already adapted to a bunch of that.
A week before this, there was a big noise about everyone's private jet and all the little, like, 10-minute flights the nitwits are taking.
Yeah.
And yeah, for a single human being to fly is, right, when you do that compared to everyone else's whatever,
Yeah, it's
that's
hugely
fucking
wasteful.
insane.
Yeah.
But
But again, you're not going to go after the millionaires
No,
and tell them they
we
all have to
could.
park their private jets.
yeah, I can.
Yeah.
You can, but they're not going to.
I'm willing
Barnabas-
to join. I'm willing to join little Tucky
Call the
Carlson
Ukrainians.
Okay.
and say
Get some of those
that people
S-300s.
can't have private jets. I think that's perfect.
I think we all agree that that would be a great start in all this.
But he's
at
going to
the same
find out that a
time-
lot of his little kleptogart friends have private jets.
Well, that was my initial thought was,
It
does
is-
anyone else get the vibe that Tucker Carlson got a bad phone call from, like, his
Here's the
investment
thing.
manager?
He's not wrong. If we were real, whatever, we would ban private jets, and that would be a thing. You're not going to be able to do that, though. So, let's talk about the other comment about rising sea levels, which is a fact that can actually be checked.
Fucking Doom on you, Doom Glacier. Let go. Give up. Drown these
Um,
motherfuckers.
oceanservice.noaa.gov has a very interesting description of global ocean rise. So let's start. What's the difference between global and local sea level? Answer. Global sea level trends and relative sea level trends are different measurements. Just as the Earth's surface is not flat, the surface of the ocean is also not flat. In other words, the sea surface is not changing at the same rate globally. Sea level rise at specific locations may be more or less than the global average due to many local factors. Subsidence, upstream flood control, erosion, regional ocean currents, variance in land height, and whether the land is still rebounding from the compressive weight of Ice Age glaciers. Sea level is primarily measured using tide stations and satellite laser altimeters. Tide stations around the globe tell us what is happening at a local level. The height of the water is measured along the coast relative to a specific point on land. Satellite measurements provide us with the average height of the entire ocean. Taken together, these tools tell us how our ocean sea levels are changing over time. So now y'all understand that just because one area may not be receiving as much flooding or whatever does not mean that the global ocean height is not changing. So now let's get into the details. Global sea level has been rising over the past century. The rate has increased in recent decades. In 2014, global sea level was 2.6 inches above the 1993 average, the highest annual average in the satellite record, 1993 to present. Sea level continues to rise at a rate of about 1/8 of an inch per year. Oh, wait.
That doesn't sound like a
1/8
lot.
of an inch per year, says NOAA.gov. So wait,
10
does
inches
that
and-
mean
10
that
inches in 100
the
years.
ocean is rising? Oh, fuck. I guess it is. Damn.
Yeah.
Higher
Well, and
sea
that's-
levels.
The thing here is that what we've seen so far are minor sea level changes.
Right, but do you want to hear what this has caused?
Sure.
Higher sea levels mean that deadly and destructive storm surges, which I think where you were going, push further inland than they once did, which also means more frequent nuisance flooding. Disruptive and expensive nuisance flooding is estimated to be from 300 to 900% more frequent within U.S. coastal communities than it was just 50 years ago. Oops.
Yeah. So the thing to recognize here is we've been dealing with baby ocean rise.
Yep.
Right. This is the result of the melting of glaciers on land and some of the glaciers in the north and south and so on. The problem is that we now have several major glaciers that are on the point of coming loose and sliding into the ocean.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing it floats on the ocean, right? No. Whether it melts or not makes no difference at all to the sea level rise that it causes.
Do it. Give up,
And
Glacier.
so we're looking at 10 inches that could occur like in 20 years, against a background of 10 inches every 100 years. So, hey, you know, there are big chunks of Florida where there are lots and lots of people living and lots of, you know, financial infrastructure and you know, real infrastructure and so on that are going to become unusable.
Yep.
And will have to be replaced further inland.
Oh, and the nuisance flooding thing, we see that. I've seen report after report of New York City is struggling with this. This is a real thing. Haven't the canals in Europe been really high? And
Well, recently they've been really low, but yeah.
well, I remember hearing something about how they had hit an all-time high.
Hey,
and
Venice is fucked.
Venice,
Yeah.
that's what I'm thinking.
Fine.
Yeah, because Venice is on the ocean and they keep losing ground.
Well, and for them, that matters. Like eighths of inches is
Yeah.
the differences on things.
Well, and don't they already
That's
float their buildings by inflating?
they lift them and build under
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
They inflate these.
Oh, many of the buildings in Venice, the first floor has been flooded for years.
Yeah.
So anyway.
But anyway, so no, he's flat out lying here. The oceans are rising, but I agree at not so much of a whatever. The only time it's really super problematic most of the time, as we are currently with this ocean rise, is when we have storms and such.
Yeah. So the
keep
problem
that
with
in mind.
ocean rise,
It's climate weirding.
the problem with ocean rise is that it affects the coastal regions, which we have decided we really like to live on, right? So we, most of the major cities on the East Coast are on the coast, and they have huge investments in infrastructure, which will have to be replaced and so forth. We're talking, you know, tens of trillions of dollars to fix that.
Yep.
But that's only a tiny part of the problem. Kentucky's not on the coast. Ask them what it was like to have the worst flooding in 1,000 years, twice.
That's fine.
Ask the folks who are being affected by the droughts that are
That does suck.
unprecedented.
It's the worst. It should stop.
And again, you know,
Trade
sea
can
level
happen.
rise is not the only consequence of climate weirding, and it may not even be the important one.
No.
So
But it's the one that's convenient, because this is going to burble back into the sort of vaguely remembered, right? Oh wait, but all the climate change that had happened, right, seems to have been heat sunk into the ocean, and that's not at all what happened. We warmed up the Gulf, and we're going to really regret the shit out of that. But
wait till you get a
It's fine.
hurricane in there; it'll happen.
no, hey, as long as you don't own real estate in Florida or really anywhere on the Gulf Coast, you're fucking awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get back into this. I forgot to remind y'all, this rant was from the 29th of August, 2022, so about a week ago. So it's still pretty current, but again, there's just a lot here.
It's more about style than the particular timeliness on this one, because
Yep.
this is him setting up about 4 test balloons on things he wants to try.
Yeah.
Yeah, so remember, this is the crux of his argument. This rant with no actual facts, just his insanely uneducated thoughts and opinions. This
Yeah.
whole section.
Well, no, you found a few occasional
It was
facts in
front-loaded
there.
with facts, so the fact checkers would get bored. It's like the
Yep.
trick the mob used to use of having their wives talk for long enough the FBI got bored and hung up. Because they're not allowed to listen once it's obviously not a crime phone.
Well, right, but we really only found one
Yep.
fact in the last 3 paragraphs.
No,
and
that's
that
why he
was-
spiked the
yeah.
ball and slapped education, because that's the hey crime talk now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're talking about if you had an 8th grade math skills, you could have figured out in about 10 minutes. Like,
Except it's not true.
No, but it gets to everyone then gets to feel superior because they went past 8th grade.
Yeah.
and they believe him, so they're smart.
Yeah.
They're
That's
smarter
obviously.
than some of these,
And anyone who
these
disagrees
university
isn't.
kids, which he was complaining about
Yeah,
earlier,
who aren't as smart as 8th graders.
believed in
Which fits
green
into that
energy.
TV thing of are you as smart as a 5th grader, which literally the whole point of the show is these kids are better educated than we are, because their current events is all the new stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so he knows. Back to
Yes.
the quote. Quote: He knows the ocean levels aren't rising. Come on. So they're all in on it. It's a scam, but they don't care because they know they personally will escape the consequences of their policies. So when the French president announces that his people are facing the end of abundance, he's not talking about himself. He's not facing the end of abundance. None of them are. Macron and all of them understand they will always be rich and always be protected.
Yes.
They know that for certain. What's changed, what's very interesting, is that suddenly everyone else who's been paying attention can see that they were lying, that they are frauds, and the entire population of Europe now knows that.
Do you think that little Tucky boy understands that exactly those same arguments apply to the kleptocracy that is the United States?
And
Does
that all
he's
this
a
little
member
clap-
of
He's a
Air
member of
Swanson
that.
No.
He is never going to be
He
affected
gets
by
paid
any of
$6
this.
million a year.
He's one of the, he's what?
He gets paid $6 million a year from just fun.
Yeah, which makes him one of their handmaidens.
No, because he has the same radio empire they all do, which is all the real.
No, but again, we're talking about billionaires who pay millionaires
Yes.
to lie to the
He's one
working
of the
folks.
millionaires.
Yes, he's a handmaid
No,
of the
and he's-
kleptocracy.
A child of the Swanson family. Like, no, he's
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
there with the Waltons in terms of.
Even if he gets fired
Family.
tomorrow from Fox News, he will still be living a
He's
better
gonna
life than
die
any
rich.
of his listeners.
Yep. And he's trying so hard to push everybody down so he can stay up. And that's what Tucky Boy does.
Well, and underwrite that behavior in his, like,
Yeah.
brain. You can't just say betters. It's not betters.
So this is where it gets interesting. Donald Trump, to his quote, Donald Trump, to his credit, whatever you think of him, caught on to this early. 4 years ago, Trump warned Europe about its energy future during his speech at the United Nations. The German delegation laughed at him. Remember this? It cuts to a clip of Trump speaking at the United Nations in 2018. Germany, quote from Trump, Germany will become totally dependent on Russian energy if it does not immediately change course. Here in the Western Hemisphere, we are committed to maintaining our independence from the encroachment of expansionist foreign powers. It has been the formal policy of our country since President Monroe. And it shows, the German delegation, like, what is going on here?
Well, and
This is
in this case,
2018.
I will happily agree with Tucker Carlson that Germany ignored all the warning signs. Right, one of their
were well
chancellors
paid
might
to.
as well be a Russian. Right, former chancellors.
He prefers the term citizen of the world.
But again, in 2018, nobody could have foreseen any of this was going to happen.
Anybody could have foreseen this.
Yep.
We know how Russia behaves. We know who Putin is.
Oh, that's
He was going
fair,
to
but-
use oil as a political weapon, period. There was no doubt about that. What Trump told him was exactly right. But Trump didn't come up with it. He had somebody competent working for him who looked at it and said, guys, they're becoming dependent on Russia, which means that Russia can turn a valve and tell them how to vote. And they're learning what the dangers of that was. Mm-hmm. Again, one of the former German chancellors might as well have Russian citizenship. He's a Pootie boy.
Right.
And they called it Londongrad because the British were all on their knees licking various parts of various Russians.
No, there's a
Now
long
they've learned what the
history
price
of
of
that.
that is.
Dang, MI5 was all fucked up.
So, Trump finishes talking, and it cuts back to Tucker, and he uses this odd, like, deep, gravelly voice. It's very strange. He goes, "Oh, they're laughing! We have green parties here in Europe. You have no idea what you're talking about."
Tucker can't do a
That's
German
weird.
accent.
Yeah, no, he says it weird.
No, and the Green parties had nothing to do with this. The Green parties would have opposed the importation of foreign energy,
Yep.
right? So anyway, again, Tucker's just off in the weeds.
Right, and what he's talking about, the green parties, is actually a whole big thing in Europe, which is
Which
a lot
is
of
why
people-
Europe gets 22% of their energy from renewables.
Yep.
So,
So-
which, by the way, Pootie Boy couldn't turn off.
Yeah.
And hey, Tucky, if you think we're immune to this, you're going to find out that the natural gas and oil markets are fungible.
Yep.
So this is the one part where Okay. So he says, but they're not laughing anymore. And yeah, no, I agree.
No, they're not.
nobody's
They've
laughing.
begun to learn their lesson about Putin. Putin has to go. And Russia has to be a pariah until he's gone and they have an actual government.
No, what we should be talking about is taking out their secondary import market. And, right, does Belarus want to be on the list with Russia? Right, that if we really are dividing the world back up into Warsaw Pact and NATO countries, fucking sweet.
Right.
China, you have to sit on that side of the table.
And Russia's going to find out that that competition does not favor them.
Oh,
now,
yeah.
now remember, we're still in this second part where he's lining up all of his arguments,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
So he started with
Energy crisis.
shitting on whatever, an energy crisis. He's talking about how, you know, the people who enact these aren't going to be subject to them when it comes to energy conservation and such, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And he's yelling about Americans being dumb, whatever. And then talks about how green energy is bullshit. And now he's talking about how Trump was right about this one thing this one time.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's move on. But they're not laughing anymore, he says. The Europeans have discovered that the real threat to human civilization is not global warming. It never was global warming. The real threat to people is global cooling, otherwise known as winter. Words have meaning, people. I keep fucking saying this. Global cooling is not winter. Winter is not global fucking cooling.
No.
Shut the fuck up. God damn. I just
Well,
want
they
to beat
need
my head
a
against his
phrase.
until he stops talking.
Yeah.
So anyway, he continues. Far more people will freeze to death every year than die of heat. In 2019, for example, 4 times as many people died of cold as of heat. That's according to the Institution for Health Metrics and Evaluation. And yeah, I looked that up. That's right.
Okay.
But extreme weather events from the research I did going beyond just that one. And it's really weird. There's no updated, you know, they said that 4 times as many people died in 2019. There's no new, like in 2020, X many people, or there's no 2021 or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's no updated information from that. So in my other research, I found that they're saying that extreme weather events, which is hot and cold, right? Just extreme weather events in general, will continue to kill more and more people each year. Hence the term climate weirding. The phrase climate warming does not describe the full effects of the actual problems we face. Hence why we here at BoomerRexTonight call it climate fucking weirding. Okay?
Yep.
I just want y'all to remember why we call it that. Because, yes, this is going to cause extreme weather events on both ends of the scale. Extreme hot and extreme cold.
But it talks to a part of his base that is well trained to respond about, well, they used to call it global cooling back in that one article in Popular Mechanics.
Right.
Back in like the 1980s?
70s.
70s.
Yeah.
And it was really, literally one article.
Yeah. That
Well,
every
wasn't it the
climate,
first time they
virtually
ever
every
written about
climate scientist in the world looked at and said,
Don't be
this
dumb.
is ridiculous. Yeah.
Everyone who went to college did.
Yeah.
That's not possibly the answer.
So again, yeah, he's right in that one thing, but he's missing the overall.
But that was just coming
Well,
back to touch a fact.
people dying of heat and cold are simply examples of the maldistribution of energy.
Yep.
Well,
Right.
and again, I don't.
And I'll bet you money, if you look at the U.S., it's more common in the U.S. than it is in Europe.
Oh, for sure.
But I also don't have any solid numbers of all the people who died in that heat wave in Europe.
Yeah.
There was a bunch of people that died in that.
No,
heat
and the
wave.
attribution, in Texas, when the electric company murdered all those people,
Yeah. Flat out.
you've got a frozen person. Now,
Yeah.
they're easy to count. In the heating events, they died of a heart attack. Why? Because they couldn't stay cold, or
Yeah.
It's very difficult to attribute a specific death to overheating,
And I
unless
saw-
you lock a child in a car.
Right, and I saw a lot of articles that were saying that it's a lot harder to attribute a death to heat than it is to attribute a death to cold.
Yep. Well, and you have to talk about one of the things we know is that if you can't be cool when you sleep, that you get angrier and angrier and angrier.
Yep.
How many of the shootings in the past year were basically heat-related deaths?
Ask
Right.
your pet cop. They
Yeah.
will tell you that violence goes up in the summer.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's more, we're also out late, but it doesn't cool off. In a lot of the places I've
Yeah.
lived, it gets darker, but it doesn't get much cooler.
No.
So, again, he was correct, but he kind of missed the point. So he continues.
I intentionally missed the point.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's a
for sure.
standard statistical thing. Find a statistic that you think you can quote and then claim it's related to what you want to babble about.
Exactly. And that's exactly what he did. Okay.
Yeah.
So, quote. So when temperatures in Europe begin to drop a few months from now, that's a huge problem. And that will be obvious to everyone. It's not global warming, it's global cooling. Which he refers
nonsense
to
phrase.
he refers to winter as global cooling. So he does an interesting thing here, which I wanted to point out to people, which is he starts with the there it is. People freeze to death, blah, blah, blah. It's not global. There it is. The real threat to people is global cooling, otherwise known as winter. And then he calls back to it, stating winter as global cooling rather than as winter, right?
Yeah.
So he connected the two, and now he just
Now
refers
he's
to
going
it.
to use the ridiculous phrase he made up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you see, he got you caught with confusing global cooling and winter, and now he used it again. So now it's in your head twice. He does a lot of these callbacks.
He is.
Well, yeah.
He did it with the 6% at the very beginning. He said the 6% of Germans use wood heat, and then he says it again. So some of these things he brings back to solidify, like I said it before, but this is why I'm saying.
Yeah. For those of you who are interested, 1.5% of Americans use wood for heat.
Yep.
So,
But again, I don't think
That's
that's
the first
counting.
thing I looked up.
yeah.
But again, I don't think that's counting people who are off grid. I don't think you can necessarily account for people who have
I think that's
hunting
the same
cabins
kind of
or second
accounting that was
houses
done
they
in Germany
use.
to get 6%. Yes.
Okay, fine. I honestly thought that.
No, as long as we're measuring by the same yardstick, I'm good.
Okay.
Or at least a similar one, right? We're already closer, right, by our sloppy back of the envelope stuff
Yeah.
than Tucker Carlson is with his fucking research company.
Yeah.
So
Well, and pellet heat may not count as using wood. Right. And
and
so on.
supplemental and 12 others,
Yeah.
right? Because we have had a wood burning stove when that was not necessary for heating.
I had a friend whose family heated on the little corn pellets.
Yeah.
And that
I,
was
I,
in
I
New
have a
Hampshire.
good friend who heats that way. His
Yeah.
whole house.
No, it works.
And that
Yeah,
was
it
in
works.
that was in downtown major city.
That's
in
kind of a cool
New Hampshire.
machine. I enjoyed watching that. We heated a house in Durham, North Carolina with wood for 3 years.
No.
And again, we had natural gas heat available and just didn't use it. The bedrooms were in the very low 60s or high 50s, and the living room was toasty warm.
Nope. I knew somebody who had a open plan house basically with a center like fire thing
Uh-huh.
and a loft. And so the exhaust things went out and up, and so you just got radiated heat in the loft plus everything.
I think I know the one you're talking about that had the giant Franklin stove on the first floor.
No, but
That was my example of that, is having spent several wonderful days in a house in Vermont, which at one time was the local post office, which is how it got it's the biggest Franklin stove I've ever seen in my life.
nice.
And the,
Dude,
so,
you're just gonna go back to saying bad, horrible Tucker things.
We have to get through this.
yeah,
Okay.
right.
So he says, it's not global warming, it's global cooling. That's what's going to kill your grandmother. And when everyone understands that perfectly well, a lot of things are going to happen. The status quo will crumble. Factories will close. Unemployment will rise. Disposable income will disappear. He didn't say it like that, but he might as well have.
Who the fuck's Tucker
part
Carlson's
of-
talking to that got disposable income?
Part of that is true. Adapting away from the Russian energy supplies is going to cause shortages, which will cause plant closings. It's going to happen. The question is, do you want to be on your knees licking Putin's balls, or do you want to move forward in a way that allows the world to develop away from having a fucking Nazi next door? So,
Yep. Well, and that's the thing, is I could give a damn about what we do with China or Russia, except for the fact that we know their efforts are going to not good places.
Yep.
Quote, and we're seeing signs of that already. Personal savings rates are down dramatically in this country.
Almost
50%.
as dramatically as when Orange Bucker, what's his name, failed to react to COVID, and we had a crash in the economy.
In this country,
Which, by the way, Joe Biden fixed.
In this country, 60% of Americans can't cover an unexpected $400 expense.
You might want to go tax the fucking kleptogarks.
This has been true since 2016. And now he suddenly cares. And actually, I think that number's a lot smaller now.
Better.
Well, and he and his orange fucktard worked very hard to help the kleptogarchies, because that's where they were getting their money from, as Tucky continues to.
And it's calling back to a statistic that everybody heard previously, that 60% of households live paycheck to paycheck.
But I did want to point out, I have not pointed out a lot of his fuck-ups, because he makes like 2 of them and they're not very whatever. But this one, he says saving rates are down, and then he goes dramatically. He was going to say 60%, so he corrected himself. But I could tell where his head was going, which is the only reason why that one particularly stood out to me.
Okay.
But I just thought it was an interesting, because he, instead of rewording it or using another word,
Do we have a real number?
48% right now.
Okay.
Which is still high, but this number he took from 2016.
Yep.
So,
or at least that's the number I could find quickly when I was helping.
Yeah.
So from what we were able to deduce, this is an old number that he's bringing out. And again, he didn't talk about this in 2016. So, as far as I know, maybe he did. But anyway.
He edged around it. That's part of the weft of his and Glenn Beck's style, is they do the hyper-partisanship thing for a while, then they say something real fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And then they apologize. Right? Glenn Beck's most recent adventure down this path took Samantha Bee with him. So, and she may not recover. Jimmy Fallon may not recover from the time he tousled Trump's hair, because he really did. Like, and you made him not
normalize the orange
Samantha
guard.
Bee dropped her show, or HBO dropped her,
I was gonna
or
say,
whatever.
I doubt, and that was part of, I assume.
And it was very sudden, because she seemed to be doing better. I had, for a while, I wasn't real too keen on some of her stuff, but she had seemed to start to get the back in the flow.
I haven't looked at the ratings.
Don't care.
Yeah.
I was just saying, for me personally, I felt like she was getting back to important stuff that I cared about, and then kind of steered off again, and then the show canceled. So I'm wondering if she tried to correct and lost it. But anyway.
No clue.
60% of Americans can't cover an unexpected $400 expense. Credit card debt increasing year over year by 13%. That's the biggest jump in 20 years. Total household debt set an all-time record 15.8 trillion. That's in this country. But 13% is as high as, I think it was 1994 was the other time we had a big high jump like that.
Well, and recognize that part of this is that folks had suspended spending during the COVID crisis.
Yeah.
And are now coming out and going places and buying things.
Yeah.
So, and at the same time, the kleptogarks are gouging people right and left.
Yep.
And there are real supply chain issues. There are real, there are causes other than kleptogarks price gouging, but it all contributes.
Yep.
So, what the hell?
No, that's why the windfall
If
profit
only
tax
we
needs
had
to go
living
through.
wages and a healthcare system that worked, this wouldn't be nearly as important.
Yeah, who'd have thought? It's also true similarly in Europe, he says. So how will spiraling energy costs affect all of this? And what will be the cascading effect? Well, when the cost of keeping your apartment warm jumps by hundreds of % in a single year, you become a completely different person. You change your behavior radically.
Which is just they already did this bit.
Yeah.
You're no longer tempted to buy a new $1,400 iPhone or shop at a Whole Foods or even pick up an cappuccino.
Disposable income goes away.
The entire consumer economy grinds to a halt because there's no discretionary income. So it's impossible to overstate the downstream effects on the world of an energy crisis.
That might wake up some of the
Everything
kleptocracies
changes.
to the idea that you need to pay people a living wage so they're not living paycheck to paycheck.
But
I
again,
absolutely hope that's what happened. Barnabas keeps sharpening them pitchforks.
he says he makes a wild claim here. When your cost of keeping your apartment warm jumps by hundreds of % in a single year, that's not happening.
We'll see. Again, energy supplies are fungible. You can move them from the U.S. to Europe. So we'll see where energy prices go. This is the price of getting rid of Pootie Boy. And Tucky Boy's solution is going to be to
Ukraine
get
not
on your
part of
knees
Russia.
and open your mouth in Putin's bedroom. So.
And again, this is just him ranting and riling up his viewers right now. There's really no substance to much of this.
No, this is about money.
Yeah.
But again, he's not wrong. If your by whatever, if your heat did increase by hundreds of a %, which isn't going to happen, but we'll say it does. Yeah, no, you wouldn't be buying an iPhone or shopping at Whole Foods. But again, the people who buy iPhones for $1,400 and shop at Whole Foods and buy cappuccinos, those are not the ones that are going to be affected by this.
That's just who the Fox News base is trained to hate.
Um,
They know those people are bad just based on any one of those facts, and here's all three.
Yeah.
all right.
Don't forget the avocado sandwiches.
Oh, yeah. He continues. Everything changes. How are the central banks responding to this? Not well. They seem to be making things worse on purpose. You know, in the United States, we're told not to notice what the Fed does because the Fed is now diverse and therefore great. Amazing piece in AP just the other day.
There's been nothing but coverage about the Fed's huge rate hikes, and yeah, no, they're doing everything they can to get the fuck away from the lower bound, because yeah, they are terrified it might all break again.
Amazing piece in the AP just the other day announcing that, quote, leadership at the Federal Reserve has become its most diverse ever. There are more female, black, and gay officials contributing to the central bank's interest rate decisions than any time in its 109-year history.
Oh my God, run for the hills. We have a diverse Fed. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. It's not Merca.
Well, and who's doing the only thing they could do since interest rates have been at zero for how long?
Yeah. Which is part of the reason we have inflation.
Yeah.
So.
He continues, okay, in other words, relax. We've got affirmative action. Everything's fine. Great.
So he's gone back to the standard Republican racism.
Shitting
Right?
on
Yeah.
He's,
He was afraid he had lost the attention span of the racists
Right.
in the room
So you
because he
gotta-
hadn't said
you
anything
gotta say
rude
something
about
racist.
those groups in a while.
yeah.
But again, there's absolutely no reason for him to even bring this up because it has absolutely nothing to do with his point.
There's
He,
absolute
like you
reason.
It's
said,
every reason to bring it up. He's trying to keep the racists at his...
exactly. No,
Okay.
but that's the only purpose to it. Was my
Yeah.
point. My point is it has nothing to do with his argument. It has everything to do with keeping his viewers angry.
Well, and you'll agree
And
now,
riled
with,
up.
and you'll agree with whatever else he wants to do, because yeah, sure, it sounds
Yep.
like he kind of knows.
Well,
something
and they're
about-
terrified of diversity. Mm-hmm. Right? Again,
This is where we need you to talk. So let me get through. There's 2 paragraphs here, and then he's going to do a clip. And before that clip, I want you to talk here.
Explain why he's lying.
Yeah. Everything's fine. Great. But somehow it doesn't seem to be working. The central banks that intentionally caused inflation, and they did, those same central banks are now hiking rates to destroy demand. The problem is, this isn't a demand problem. This is a supply problem, and it stems primarily from the war in Ukraine. Because of that war, the West does not have enough energy to continue its economy or its society. Europe responds to that war by imposing sanctions, and they knew would inevitably cause energy shortages. They knew it when they did it. Here's the president of the European Commission back in May. And then it cuts. But so what I want you to clarify for people is where he says those same central banks are now hiking rates to destroy demand. The problem is this isn't a demand problem, it's a supply problem. Now, the supply problem started with COVID.
And the only reason he
sort
said
of-
supply side is it's Republican, so he gets to say supply side economics because that's what they.
So, and
But
he's
we're on the
accurate
other
that that's,
end of
that
that
that's
supply
part of the problem, right?
We're kind of digging ourselves out of the
To
supply.
keep the economy going during COVID, we spent a lot of money and we reduced rates dramatically, which kept businesses running. Now, if we look, we're going to find out that there was a lot of criminality in those programs, and awful lot of it was in people that I would categorize as rethugs. We might want to visit some of that.
And oligarchs, yep.
But there are a number of contributions. Yes, the energy shortage is going to be a problem, period. That is a supply problem, period. There are a number of things we can do about that. The Japanese are extending the life of their nuclear power supplies and so forth and so on. We will do something we should have done a long time ago, which is put on a jacket and turn down the damn thermostat.
Yeah.
Raise the thermostat, wear less clothing, et cetera, et cetera. But there are lots of other parts of that. It's not just shortage of energy. The COVID damaged a whole bunch of the supply infrastructure that delivers the ingredients that go into products.
Right.
And so we'll look at chips as a perfect example, is that as the chip supplies became thin on the ground, there was basically a bidding war, right? And so any chip that was already there that you could actually buy was worth more money than it had been a little while ago. And that'll all settle out. The supply systems are adapting and so forth. And we'll talk later about the fact that since Russia does not have a modern supply system, they have benefited from that. So anyway, so you have real shortages in oil and lots of other things. At the same time, we'll take the perfect example, which is that the price of raw oil is unchanged and the price of gasoline is up by 70%. And the profits of the energy companies are the highest they've ever had. We've been price gouged. But because the Republicans get so much money from the oil industry, they didn't want to do the tax that would have stripped off the
Windfall
profits. So again, they're down on their knees to somebody. It's standard Republican, if I give you some more money, will you give me some more money? And, again, that they're ripping off America. That's what they do. That's who they are. That's their stock and trade.
Right, but specifically the central banks that are hiking rates to destroy demand. I think
we'll see how the central banks do.
I think he's referring to because buying homes now, the interest rates have gone up to try to slow down home buying because they were going so fast off the shelves, so to speak, that people couldn't buy houses, so they had to increase to try to slow that down.
That was a side effect of the very free credit markets. Raising interest is what we should be doing in a period of growth, right? That's one of our controls on the economy. We'll see how the Fed's being pretty aggressive, and we'll see if they manage to get their foot off the accelerator and not break stuff. But yeah, the increasing interest rates reduces demand in very specific ways and cools the economy. So as recently as last week, the employment results suggest that the economy is gradually cooling, which is what the Fed is trying to manufacture. But once they have the interest rates back up where they've historically been, so 4, 5, 6%, that range, then they have a knob they can turn if something goes bad in the economy. But when your interest rates are effectively zero, you've got your
and they work for
you've got the pedal to the metal, right? If anything else goes wrong, you're in big trouble.
Right.
So what the Fed is doing is arguably right. Of course, the old joke was that nothing scared the Fed worse than the thought that somebody got a job. So we're going to have to watch them close because they have a tendency to wrap that brake pretty damn hard. And, so we'll see.
So he says, I quote, "Here's the president of the European Commission back in May." And he shares a clip of a woman standing on a podium, who I'm assuming is the president of the European Commission. And let's be clear, she says, it will not be easy because some member states are strongly dependent on Russian oil, but we simply have to do it. So today we will propose to ban all Russian oil from Europe. Really? Tucker says. Are you going to be keeping your apartment at 49 degrees Fahrenheit? Will you be walking to work? No, of course not. You'll have whatever you want forever. But the rest of us, she informed us, quote, simply have to do it.
The thing you have to remember is that Tucky Boy has been a Putin cheerleader for years.
Profitable.
And still is. So all of this, you can trace back to the desire to please some Russians, and you might ask yourself why.
So, the only reason humans do anything.
That's certainly my speculation, but again, it's only speculation.
Back to Tucker. But the rest of us, she informed us, quote, simply have to do it. And it's not just energy that's being affected by these sanctions. In Brussels, Joe Biden warned that food shortages are inevitable. Remember this? And he shares a clip of Joe Biden speaking in front of NATO OTAN background labeled March. So March of this year, 2022. And Biden says, with regard to food shortages, yes, we did talk about food shortages, and it's going to be real. The price of these sanctions is not just imposed upon Russia, it's imposed upon an awful lot of countries as well, including European countries and our country as well. Back to Tucker. Oh, we're all going to have to buckle down for freedom. We have to shovel billions to Ukrainian oligarchs who clearly hate the United States because it's the right thing to do. We need to hurt Russia because it's our moral duty.
Oh my God.
So did these sanctions actually hurt Russia? They caused food and energy shortages throughout the West. No, they didn't hurt Russia. Russia today has more than enough
Let's
energy.
hold off on Russia for a minute.
More energy than they can use or sell. In fact, Russia has so much excess natural gas that it's simply setting it on fire. Continue.
We need to recognize in those last comments from little Tucky Boy is that he's a surrender monkey and always has been. Yeah. Right? He'd be perfectly happy to surrender all of Ukraine to the Russians.
Oh, yeah.
And get his kleptogork buddies back in the Russian dollar trough.
Yep.
So, again, there's some very specific reasons that Tucky Boy is such a surrender monkey. So.
Well, it's easy to advocate for when
Is
it's
he
not.
French?
No.
Oh, we sure?
I don't know. I think the nationalism thing works better when nations work for people.
Yeah.
More energy than it can use or sell. In fact, Russia has so much excess natural gas that it's simply setting it on fire. That's right, flaring it, as they say. A Russian plant near the border of Finland is burning $10 million worth of natural gas every day. This seems like a big story. So how's the media covering this? Well, here's the BBC. Quote, scientists are concerned about the large volumes of carbon dioxide and soot it is creating, which really could exacerbate the melting of Arctic ice.
Yeah.
What I want to say is that I did a research into Russia flaring oil, and I found minimum, and this was not even really looking, a dozen different sites and major news contributors reporting on this. So as much as he's saying no one's talking about this, I promise you I found it on literally
Well-
just a Google search. The top 12 articles were exactly what he was talking about.
Right, and none of them from Fox News.
So that reinforces just the right. Don't listen to them. Listen to us.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The thing you have to realize about Tucky Boy is he don't read, he talks.
Yep.
So, and much of his audience, the only place they go is Fox News. So, hey.
Well, and his success in court by saying no credible human would believe the things he says
Yeah.
has given him license to say the most insane shit because that just proves more.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm gonna do this again, but he uses a really strange hoarse voice after this quote that he says. So I'm gonna try to copy his whatever. This is gonna be weird. Hold your horses. Which could exasperate the melting of Arctic ice. Really? That's your concern. More global warming, when the immediate effect is to make it impossible for people to Europe to stay warm. I think it was supposed to be in Europe to stay warm, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure. We'll assume. For people in Europe to stay warm. You can reach a place in your society where the people in charge and their lapdogs in the media become so completely disconnected from the concerns of actual people, become so totally uninterested in the lives of citizens that the society becomes a very volatile, and we are fast approaching that point.
So, but I don't think he's smart enough. I'd say he's talking to Texans as they prepare to blame, right, green energy requirements as to why they're not hooked up to the national grid.
Yeah.
But
Well, and remember their big thing was, what failed in Texas was the windmills and no, not true at all. They
Yep.
continued to produce right through the period. What failed
there's at
were their
least a
fucking
shorter
natural
picture.
gas plants.
yeah, no, I
No, it was just his was like, to me, I was like, that's a little
No,
over
and,
the
and,
top.
and
like,
at some level, he's partially correct that the major problem is what are we going to do for energy over the next short period while the world adapts to the fact that we're not going to burn a whole bunch of Russian energy.
well, we're smart.
And
Get our people angry at Russia and turn the sanctions knobs tighter.
well,
yeah.
let's get back to this flaring thing. Because what I really think Russia is doing with burning literally $10 million worth of natural gas, I think that's literally him saying, fuck y'all, you're not going to buy it, I'll burn it. That's him being a shithead. That's all this is.
Depending
do it for-
depending on how your systems are set up
They-
and how it
They
adapts
do
to a
it-
sudden drop
they-
in usage.
They do it for pressure release and stuff like that too,
Exactly.
but...
Yeah.
So no incentive not to.
Don't know. But yes, it increases the carbon dioxide, which is a bad thing.
So now we get to his point, okay? And this is how he ends part 2 of his little rant. The society becomes very volatile, and we are fast approaching that point. So we could fix this problem. The solution to this catastrophe is very straightforward. End the war in Ukraine.
Yep, give up. Surrender, Monkey Tucky.
Nuke St. Petersburg.
No, what we should do is send NATO in, drive the Russians back to their fucking border.
But so that's the end of part 2, and we are now entering part 3 of his rant, which
Okay.
is the final conclusions, so to speak, with a lot of bullshit in between. All right. End the war in Ukraine, he says. Reestablish energy flows into Europe and save the global economy, including ours. Is Joe Biden doing that? There are other reckless Western leaders like Boris Johnson doing that? No, they're doing the opposite. They're sending billions more from their dying economies to Ukrainian oligarchs for no good reason. UK just committed $2.8 billion to Ukraine in a country where 70% of pubs, callback, 70% of pubs may close because they can't afford electricity. That is a government that's preparing for power outages in the middle of winter. Or this is a government that's preparing for power outages in the middle of winter. Now, first of all, I want to remind y'all, Boris Johnson resigned July 7th, so almost 2 months before
Yeah.
this is even talked about.
Yeah.
So, of all the people he could have mentioned, I don't know why he brought
Again,
up Boris
this
Johnson.
is nothing on earth but a strong Putin supporter railing against the things that are hurting Putin. You have to understand whose
He's got
side.
entirely too much background, having pushed Putin for having a white country where gays are afraid,
Yeah.
with a strong religious, right?
Yeah. No,
theocratic
he is a Putin supporter.
institutions. Yeah, God, yeah. Well, in Hungary and any other strongman, somewhere where
Oh,
you
yeah,
can do whatever
absolutely.
you want by the international right of fuck you.
Yeah.
But again, this is another one of his random callbacks, right?
Yep.
Because we once again see the 70% of pubs may close. We already discussed
Yeah.
that's an initial whatever, and things are probably going to be done to protect them.
And that the better estimate is a number substantially lower than that.
50%, and
So.
probably even significantly lower than that. But
Yeah.
in the final
I probably
tally,
wouldn't take my numbers from the people who make the money on the pubs. Every small business I know has always threatened their workers and anyone who will listen with, "We could close tomorrow."
Yep.
Including a place that used to have cocaine at its fucking Christmas party. So if you have a cocaine budget for Christmas parties, motherfucker,
Yeah.
we're not going out of business.
all right. So now we get into some real. This is where he's really amping up, right? He's really getting into this.
Again, he is supporting a foreign power. That's what he's doing.
Oh yeah, no, he
Let's
wants.
understand that.
He wants to warn Ukraine to
He's
stop.
supporting anyone
He
allied
wants-
with the where he wants us to go.
Right.
I
Again,
love.
foreign powers.
I love how he presents Russia as saving the world by us letting him take Ukraine. That's gonna save the world. Letting Russia do exactly what it wants to do while it's having its little hissy fit and dancing on its toes and jumping up and down and yelling and saying, "Look, I'm burning things." Like that's what Russia's doing. It's having a little child baby.
It's
temper
standard.
tantrum.
It's standard Republican isolationism.
Yep.
And in the case of the current Republican Party, it's their desire to emulate a foreign power.
Hey, they'd be happy to clone Huey Long if they could.
Yeah.
Back to Tucker.
Fascists tend to support fascists.
Back to Tucker. This is a government that's preparing for power outages in the middle of winter, like Texas should be doing. Okay, I'm sorry, back. As The Guardian reported, quote, under the government's last... So he puts a quote on the screen, and the quote says, under the government's latest reasonable worst-case scenario. Tucker actually says under the government's last reasonable worst case scenario. I just wanted to explain for anyone who watches it, he just says last instead of latest. It's the same thing. It doesn't mean anything. But anyway, reasonable worst case scenarios. Officials believe the UK could experience blackouts for several days in January if cold weather combines with gas shortages to leave the country short of power. Well, of course cold weather will combine with gas shortages because that's when people use gas, when the weather is cold. Wake up, geniuses! Maybe. You might be right. It depends
Texas
on how
freaked out
well...
and died because they had 107.5 hours under freezing temperatures. Europe has actual fucking winter.
And they're
where
preparing
it
for
doesn't
it.
get warm. Exactly.
As
Yeah.
we speak, they
And
are preparing for
Unlike
it.
Texas, functional government.
Yeah.
So again, this is just him over-exaggerating situations, whatever. Wake up, geniuses! And it's not just happening in the UK. Again, it's happening everywhere. Spain just approved more than 50 million euros for Ukraine, and that's not including funding for military hardware. And
As little as possible.
okay. Sorry about that. I lost my place for a second. And that's not including funding for military hardware. In other news, Spain's Congress just implemented temperature controls on commercial buildings. Air conditioning must be no cooler than 27 degrees Celsius. That's 80 Fahrenheit, by the way, in case you don't live there in August. After 10 p.m., shop windows and unoccupied public buildings won't be lit. Oh no.
All
how
good ideas.
terrible.
Yeah.
What a
Way to go,
horrible
Spain.
way to save electricity by not
Oh my God.
having occupied structures lit.
Well, otherwise they could just send money to Pooty Boy for energy and everything would be
This-
fine, and
this
Tucky
sounds-
Boy would be happy.
This sounds to me like just common sense regulation. So, also I want to remind y'all, Spain's temperature regulations cover theaters, cinemas, museums, restaurants, and shopping malls, leaving kindergartens, hospitals, schools, universities, gyms, hair salons, and laundromats out.
Okay.
So again, like all the places where, 80 degrees, fucking wear a tank top, you're fine.
Yep.
You're not gonna die.
No, there are a number of commercial facilities in the U.S. where the air conditioning is set 78 degrees.
So again, this isn't a big deal. How about Italy? Back to Tucker. How about Italy? He says, well, Italy has allocated more than 600 million euros for Ukrainian refugees, and yet at the same time, air conditioning in Italian schools and public buildings has already been restricted in what the government labeled Operation Thermostat that began in May. Italy's Ukraine funding is a lot, but it's not quite as much as France. So before we get into France, I want to talk about Italy. Operation Thermostat. Previously, before Operation Thermostat, they could cool to 26 degrees Celsius. And now it's down to 27 with a 2-degree leeway. Big fucking deal. So this
in the
literally
mid-70s.
changed nothing.
Right.
Okay? For anybody
They
in
said
Italy.
give Tucky Boy something to whine about.
The people in Italy do not give a fuck about
Yeah.
this. They're like, I have to turn it down a degree. Oh, well.
Do you imagine that he just goes and tells his researchers, please find me something to whine about?
Also, I want to let you all know that Italy was importing about 40% of its gas from Russia.
No,
And,
Russia's a big supplier for all
I
those
also
people.
want to remind
Yeah,
you
Europe
that
has taken a far bigger risk on this than we have.
Russia is the one cutting the umbilical cord. I want to remind you of this because some
Russia
countries...
is using gas and oil as a political weapon
Yep.
so that nobody will interfere with
Well, they
their
can do
Nazi
whatever-
Wait, wait, wait.
takeover of Ukraine.
Didn't Tucker quote somebody saying that earlier? Who was that?
Yeah, well, in his-
Emmanuel Macron? Who said that?
And his solution is to surrender Ukraine and get on his knees.
The good news is...
Standard Republican
We're getting to the
isolationism.
end of his rant, and his point is coming very soon. So this is good. We're on the downslope here. Got about a half a page of huge letters here. Okay. So back to Tucker. Italy's Ukraine funding is a lot, but not quite as much as France. France has sent more than $2 billion US dollars to Ukraine. Actually, he says France has sent more than $2 billion US to Ukraine. That's the quote. And at the same time, France is fining shopkeepers for keeping the doors open and running their air conditioning so we can send more weapons to one of the most corrupt governments in the world. I want to let you all know that keeping those shop doors closed saves 20% on electricity.
Yep.
That's not a
It's
small
something they
amount.
should have done anyway.
That's something
And I
that
want to point out that this is a Russian talking point that Ukraine is corrupt, right? This is right out of Pooty Boy's talking points, right? This is who Tucker Carlson is, right? He is representing a foreign power.
Hey, this is the convenient memory of it. Because, yes, that was Ukraine.
Yes, and now they have new
Before-
leadership.
Yeah.
In fact, it was the Ukraine that wait a minute, it was the Ukraine that we sanctioned, and
Yeah.
you have to wonder why the Orange Fool was so upset about that. And
Because
yeah,
Russia uses the secondary fucking import markets the other way.
mm-hmm.
They make businesses profitable in wherever.
Yep.
But again, I want to remind you that a lot of these European nations, like I said before, already have, as example with Italy, they already have rules on how warm or how cool you can keep a temperature at certain times of year. And all they did was lower it by 1 degree in Italy, and it's saving them
Raised it,
so
but yes.
much.
Are they still
Well,
modern
They
countries?
raised it by 1 degree.
Oh no, they're back to back
They're
to strict
Stone Age.
Damn it!
Stone Age. Yeah.
They're sitting out by campfires, trying to get cold, rubbing their hands
So it's
together.
other Russia, I guess.
Yeah.
They're out in caves, lighting fires. And, oh, it's cold, me hungry. let's
Painting
go
all the
hunt."
saddle buildings they used to live in.
Looking enviously at the folks in the U.S. who are working 2 jobs and still can't afford housing and food.
Yeah,
Yeah.
three jobs. Some people I know
Yeah,
work 3
again.
jobs.
But the
anyway.
kleptogarks are going great, which is wonderful for Tucky.
Yep. Well, that's whose investment coattails he rides.
Yeah. What can I say?
And if we're not enforcing at the top, we're not enforcing anywhere in the middle, and we're only going after the top of the bottom.
Quote.
Tax the rich or eat the rich. They
Oh,
can
this was
take their
another
pick.
thing I wanted to make fun of him for. Tucker says, quote, in France, illuminated signs are banned from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. How dare they? How dare they ban illuminated signs from the time when nobody's using them? Can you imagine being the
That's
person
how you
across the
tell
street?
whether a U.S. business is open or closed.
Yeah.
They turn off their lights when they shut their doors.
But the illuminated sign thing just fucking kills me because some people live where like they have that shitty apartment and there's that neon sign right across the
I
street
love my
and
friend's
it keeps them
apartment.
awake
My friend
forever.
had an apartment that, the Sitco sign right by, brain, no, the other one.
Boston?
Yes.
Yeah. The Fenway Sitco.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had a friend whose apartment was right fucking there.
Could you
And that
imagine
was
how
awesome.
happy he'd be if they shut it off from
Yeah,
1
yeah,
a.m.
we
to
used
6
to sit on the roof
a.m.?
and put beer bottles on.
Oh, God.
It was the best.
But yeah, no, I can just picture so many people just being so happy about this. Like, oh, I can sleep for 5 whole hours. This is amazing.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
Anyway, Tucker continues. For our part, the United States has sent more than $10 billion in military aid. That's 19 packages of weapons to what Mitch McConnell tells us is the most important thing in the world. Congress has approved more than $30 billion in additional spending. So how's all that spending working out? Are we winning the war in Ukraine? Have we bankrupted Vladimir Putin like Joe Biden claimed we would? The ruble just hit a 7-year high against the US dollar in June.
That's
Do you want to know what that 7-year high was? 15 cents.
Yep.
15 cents on the dollar is the 7-year high for the ruble. Jesus fuck. And again, I wanted you to explain this one, BoomerRex, because
Okay.
this is one that they did a lot of gymnastics to keep it. Russia has done some serious gymnastics to up their the price of the ruble and to keep the price of the ruble going up rather than trashing. People have been looking at this like well, I don't know what they're doing, but it's working, whatever it is. And what they're actually doing is they're playing some real serious fucking economical gymnastics.
Yeah. Well, remember that the price of the part of the Russian economy that is still a command economy, right, are the banks. And the Russians have been playing financial games to keep the ruble up, like requiring that people pay for gas and oil in rubles and so forth and so on. The price of the ruble doesn't mean anything, right? What matters is what's going on economically in Russia. And what's going on economically is, we'll start with the simple one, they didn't have a modern supply system, right? And we have learned that just in time may not be the best idea in the world.
super bad.
But Russia had a completely ineffective supply system. So in a lot of places, what they did were stockpile the parts that go into whatever it is they're building, whether it's cars or computers or whatever. So the sanctions didn't immediately hurt them. They continued to have, a backlog of parts that they could put in and so forth. On the other hand, to understand what's happening in Russia, they are suffering a 2008 turndown. And they're going to suffer another one next year and another one the year after that. Right? And there's nothing they can do about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
All across Russia, there are things that they will have to stop making because they simply cannot get the Western parts they have to have.
To put that into perspective, that is the economic hole that undid the millennials. We had 3 years of that.
Yeah.
Right, but I'd read a bunch of articles about this, and to try to explain them in any sort of understandable terms was just not something I could personally wrap my brain around.
Yeah.
I could understand the concepts and what they were trying to say to me, and I got it, and it made sense. But to then try to turn around and re-explain it to people, I was like, there's no chance. I can't do this.
No, I mean, what's happening is that their economy is gradually collapsing as they run through their stockpiles of whatever and whatever. Their government's doing everything it can to try to hide that from their middle class, which they're going to find out. So,
but another thing that in these articles, one of the articles was talking about how basically India and China are part of the reason why they've been able to keep the ruble up, right, and be able to keep some stuff
India and China
moving.
are still buying energy and are still trading with them and so forth.
Right, but
These are things we might want to suggest to both India and China are bad ideas.
Right. But another thing is that remember when all those companies bailed out of Russia? We talked about that. How a bunch of food companies and that sort of stuff said we're not, and they just walked away. So what they left behind. So the supplies and stuff that they left behind were then being used, were either taken by the Russian government and then being subsidized out to the people to kind of help pad a lot of this. So a lot of this is false padding. Does that make sense? Where it's been falsely held up, but as those start to run down, as you were saying, so now we come into what you were saying, that all starts to collapse. And India and China can only do so much to continue feeding what little bits that they can,
especially
back
if they're
to
told
Russia.
not to.
I don't know if they're ever going to be told not to. I don't think we want to have that fight with China, but
Just mention.
I think China wants to have that fight a lot less.
Yeah.
It'd be really easy to flip the racist switch, and go for them.
But basically, what we're trying to explain to you, if you didn't catch it, is that the ruble is being artificially inflated. That's not really what it's worth.
It's not a measure of the Russian economy. It's not a measure of anything.
Another thing that I found is that, they said that if you bank trade, if a bank trades with another bank, they're going to hold it up at this whatever rate it's at. However, if you're a private person and you're trying to trade your rubles for euros, you're going to get it at 135, I believe it was, points on the dollar, the euro, or the American dollar. I don't remember which it was, but it was 135, difference, right? So instead of 15 cents on the dollar, it was 135 rubles to like €1 or something like that. So for a person, for your average human being, you're not going to get those bank rates.
Right.
You're
They're
gonna
trying to generate a number that the people who support them can quote because it sounds good.
Right.
Hey, wait, that's literally what just happened.
Yeah.
But again, that number is artificial. That's not really what the ruble is worth to the average Russian citizen.
And we haven't hit the top of what sanctions can look like.
Yeah.
So again, this is just him spouting numbers that he found that makes it look good and supports his whatever. It's all bullshit. Anyway, where was I? The ruble has hit a 7-year high against the US dollar in June. Take a look at this chart comparing the Russian ruble against the euro. Russia's doing well. Europe is not doing well at all. And that's when I said it was 15. I thought it's 15 cents to the euro or whatever that equivalent is. I have no idea. But anyway, it's not much. Now Joe Biden is calling for an unconditional surrender from Vladimir Putin. Here's the weird thing. By any actual reality-based measure, Vladimir Putin is not losing the war in Ukraine. He's winning the war in Ukraine.
We should keep going.
Yeah.
And Joe Biden looks at that and says, we won't stop till you offer an unconditional surrender. This isn't bad policy. This is nuts. It makes no sense. In fact, it only makes sense if the goal is to completely destroy the West in order to make way for Chinese global dominance. What would be the other explanation of this behavior? Cute. And that's how he finishes part 3 of his amazing rant. It's all about China.
That lets the crazies run off and do a whole bit about Hunter Biden's China adventures.
Yeah. So, and recognize that this is an active supporter of Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
And hungry.
Yep.
Any
Again,
strong man
of the
anywhere.
fascists. He likes fascists.
For those of you who don't know, hungry's bad. They're
Yep.
fascist.
Yep.
And they hate gay people.
Oh,
They
yeah.
hate
Well, all the
LGBTQ
things-
in general.
Everybody-
And
all the-
black people.
Everybody who thinks they can oppress their way to a better life will fall for fascism.
Yep. So, and the other thing is, no, Russia is not by any means winning the war in Ukraine. They have lost the war in Ukraine by every rational measure.
Yeah.
First of all, they've lost 100,000 troops.
Yeah,
But that's not the real cost. The thing they've lost is Europe used to be afraid of the Russian army. And
Yep.
now they know they don't have to be. And that NATO could crush them.
without us.
So,
So,
yeah.
what is the goal to this whole rant, aside from Chinese dominance and we need to end the war? in
Hey,
Ukraine
Chinese
and-
dominance is a good way to end it because it gets all of the rabid anti-communism that's lying around in America's attic.
Yeah.
Which is fine because again, I really do think we should put China on the other side of that fucking table.
Yep.
Right?
No, and again,
we are
it's just,
having a Cold War with China already.
this is, again, just, the puppy-like support for Putin,
Yeah,
right? That's what Tucker Carlson does. That's who he is.
that's what makes money.
So-
Right,
That's the
but
problem with the international right.
I would argue that he spends this entire rant catastrophizing, right?
Yep.
He catastrophizes everything.
sure.
From, the energy crisis. He over-exaggerates everything.
And back to his truth. If this happened in America, this thing. That's not what's going to happen.
No, and I want to remind you that some of this I had no intent of going through and whatever because I assumed that his facts were correct. So I was just looking up the facts to see what the details of it were.
Yeah.
So I was horrified to find how he had twisted some of these from
Many of them.
actual facts and then just leaving out kind of key things like the 25% in one day, which was actually the year ahead, not an actual increase. Like just the small details that made a big difference. The whole 60% of Americans can't afford a $400 bill
Well-
since 2016.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like these are major things.
And the orange
that
pool didn't
completely-
make it any better.
that completely change his argument, and he just happens to gloss over or leave out or whatever he does, and it's just
Well, and you have to see where he wound up, which was blame it all on Joe Biden. Joe Biden's got to go. We got to have the orange
and
pool
Joe
back.
Biden's a China lover. He loves China. He wants China to have global domination. That's what Biden wants.
Right.
Because I've ever heard anything even relating to that out of fucking Biden's mouth or
No,
from
but it's
anything
the
he's
only
trying
place,
to do.
right? You've got to position Democrats near communists. It's the only way the socialist bullshit's going to ring any kind of true or follow any semblance of coherent thought. Not that that's a fucking requirement, but that's the spoonful of sugar that makes the xenophobic batshit go down.
And don't forget the tie-ins to racism. I mean, that's
lots
great.
of those. I mean,
Yeah.
if
Because
I-
diversity at the Fed's the problem.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
God, you can't have a diverse Fed. It's
No,
got to
and-
be
And again,
fat, white, stupid
mentioning
males.
that had absolutely no benefit to his argument except to be a dick and to, like
And
you
to
said,
fire up the
to
racist.
fire up the
Yeah.
racist LGBTQ scared people, right?
Yep.
Like that's all he wanted to do.
Is there an LGBTQ on the Fed?
Apparently, there's gay people, all kinds of stuff. he
Are there?
said. Yeah.
And I don't care one way or the other. I'm just interested in whether he just added that one on to be part of his rant.
No, he was actually quoting AP, who did an article. But no, it really is just crazy, and having to having to go over this over and over and over again, like it fucking hurts, man. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, here it is. So he quotes AP, who did an article saying leadership at the Federal Reserve has become its most diverse, there are more female, black, and gay officials contributing to the central bank's interest rate decisions than at any time in its 109-year history. And that was the quote from AP.
There is a black gay president of a federal bank. Okay, cool.
So,
I just wondered whether that was completely superfluous or just, again, getting in on the racism and bigotry that is the GOP.
And assuming that if they stayed tuned that long, they weren't fact-checking much of this.
Yeah.
No.
Again, I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, I was doing the same thing.
Okay.
but again, I don't really enjoy quoting Tucker. This has been really rough for me. I literally took the entire weekend to not do anything involving politics or whatever. On Friday, we did a show for y'all, but it wasn't our normal type of show. There wasn't a lot of news to discuss, and I just mentally was worn out from looking all this up. But in any case, I apologize for having to put y'all through this, but at the same time, I hope that maybe this is up-armored you to, like, sometimes he'll say stuff that, yeah, that sounds kind of right, and then when you look into it a little bit, you find that,
No, he's got a very
maybe
specific
not.
agenda, and he's looking for things that
Anything.
either fully or partially support that agenda.
Right, and again, he drops so many, like, numbers and whatever, and again, with no details of to what exactly, like, some of these things he could have gone into entire, like, deep discussion like we did about where it came from, why, and what good it's doing or not doing,
Yeah.
and blah, 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 blah,
The
blah.
only,
and he
the only real
goes
thing
the other way, yeah.
in his whole rant is that we're going to have some energy shortages.
Yep.
And the question is whether you can find creative ways to deal with the energy shortage, or you want to continue to be at the mercy of Putin's imperial goals. Right? He wants to reassemble the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
We warned Iraq way more before we did shit than Russia did when they cut off the gas.
Yeah.
They should remember that one of the routes to, like, quick war between the U.S. and Soviets was threatening Europe's ability to heat itself.
Yeah.
So
Right.
usually that was a fight over the Middle East, but
Right, but
Russia,
again,
he's playing a game that could get you all killed on accident.
oh,
Yeah.
God, yeah. Again, my intent of sharing this verbatim was so that y'all can go watch his show and double check me and know
It's in
that
context,
it
whatever
is
it was.
100% context. There is no missing context here, start to fucking finish. And I wanted to, and that was like my biggest
Stupid
reason.
in its own words.
That
And
was
again,
my
that's
biggest
what there are-
reason for wanting to whatever, because there's a lot of that out there where people are saying, well, that's not what I said, that's out of context, blah, blah, blah. Alex Jones' biggest line is,
Yep.
you took me out of context. And
And all it needs is a handful of good examples of when the media does.
I want
and-
y'all to understand that we here at BoomerX Tonight care. And we wanted you to see, start to finish, everything that he said
His
that
context
was
didn't
wrong
build the
and
argument
why.
he's claiming it did.
No. Again,
This is one of those impossible drawings, only it's the intellectual equivalent of it, and that's if you literally paid attention to every word,
Yeah.
but he knows you don't.
rattle off 3 real facts, rattle off 15 more twisted facts, and then
Stab 2 lies.
say that this supports your idiotic conclusions.
Well, and again, a lot of his flat out lies, like when he goes on about, Obama lives on beachfront property. Do you think that he believes the ocean levels are rising? Like, fucker, you can literally look that up. It is a thing. It is rising. Yeah, not at the rate that people think it is or whatever, but it is rising. It is a problem. It's causing 300 to 900%
Yep.
increase.
And you should be angry at this
flooding.
rich guy.
Yeah.
This is not okay.
Yep.
So,
I mean, it's the same reason half the time, well, more often now because they decided that Bill Gates did the coronavirus, but before that, they either liked him as an entrepreneur or hated him as the guy that owned the most farmland in the United States.
well, but again, Obama's beachfront property may not go underwater, but could it potentially be flooded by a huge storm? Oh, hell yeah. And
Washed
he's-
away in a 1,000-year rain event?
And
No idea.
Yeah.
Is he gonna get money for that? Of course he is,
I'm sure
because he's
it's
got
worse.
Like, it's fine. So, again, nobody who's rich and lives on the ocean cares if their shit goes underwater because guess what? Insurance is going to pay for all that and more because they can afford that type
Well, and then
of
they
flood
can bill it
insurance.
back
It's
to working folks
expensive.
on their renter's policy.
Right, but it's just dumb. And anyway, so I just really wanted y'all to.
No, this was excellent. It's fun to go through Tucker Carlson and see what it is he does and how he makes the fallacious arguments that he claims support the idiot conclusions. So,
Well, yeah, and how it's all absolute bullshit in the end every time. Because not once have I done one of these, and this is technically only my second, but I imagine this trend will
Yeah.
continue, where we found him to have any sort of a reasonable point.
Yeah.
So, on that note, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, heart, follow, review,
smash that like button on YouTube.
Go to BoomerRexTonight, no spaces on Facebook for fun memes and a link to our Patreon. Give us $1. You can find us on YouTube as BoomerX or check your favorite podcasting service for BoomerRexTonight. We can be found on over a dozen different platforms, including Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Samsung Podcasts. Hit us up on Twitter at BoomerRexTonight. And if you Google BoomerRexTonight, no spaces, all links will lead you to us. Check me out, RisenLadyHeathen on Twitch. We love y'all. We'll see you back here tomorrow night for more BoomerRexTonight.
Good night, y'all.
Another